All right, guys, back here on Southeastern 14 with Max Barr. We continue our look at the SEC basketball transfers this offseason. We're back to Kentucky because, again, the Cats got a lot of them.
And we're caught up now with this.
We're caught up with Kentucky. How about that, Kentucky fans? We finally made it. In addition to doing our weekly SEC basketball show, which I'm sure some of you already watched. We had a great interview with Brandon Ramsey last week, and so we'll link that. You can watch that if you want a deep dive into Kentucky basketball. But we have been covering all the transfers. We've talked about a lot of Kentucky players. We're finally getting to two more to get caught up, and we'll get into those here shortly. Before we do, as always, a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline, because, as you know, they're the number one source for the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup playoffs, although by the time you watch this, those both may be over based on the way they're going. But every stat, every matchup, and live odds and spreads while the game's being played. When it's over, you can go to the online casino and get on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get on the action. Use that promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online. The game starts here. All right. We're caught up, Max, because we're finally getting two guys that are going to round out this Kentucky roster, at least right now. Let's start with Brandon Garrison because he's someone who comes from the power conference level, of course, coming over from Oklahoma State's big 6'11", about 245, something like that. I always like when you put up the pictures, and it's just like it really accentuates like a beast is what this guy is. So you just look at it. You got Mark Pope already. He's ready for this guy.
Fired up.
But thoughts, Max, on Brandon Garrison joining this Kentucky roster, which, again, and how maybe fits into all the other guys we've already talked about here.
Yeah, so let's rewind real quick to the recruitment. How did he end up here at Kentucky? It was a little bit of a wild ride, Blake. So he takes visits to 3 SEC schools. So he takes a visit to Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Comes down to his final 2 list. It's Arkansas and Kentucky. Hasn't taken a visit to Kentucky yet. Almost every single 247 on 3, wherever you look, predictions are for Arkansas. He chooses Kentucky without ever taking a visit. So that was a big surprise to a lot of us who were following all the transfer portal stuff and the Trilly Discord. We were all surprised. So you're getting the number one word you're going to see here with Garrison, wherever you look, is untapped potential. Your potential. You got a young kid here, former top 50 recruit, McDonald's All-American, call it whatever you want. This kid's got a lot of potential. Started 29 games last year in the Big 12. Like, 29 games as a freshman big man in a league where, I mean, you've got some of the best big men in the country. So there's a lot of excitement around him. This guy is ready to take a leap. He averaged just under 8 points a game, just over 5 rebounds. And people are saying, like, he's got a lot of potential. That's a pretty good line there as a freshman, I'll say.
Yeah, and I like what you have added in here because, one thing I always like to look at is how does a guy fare against, decent competition, good competition. It's a little different here because he is coming from the Big 12. But, I mean, it's like, hey, he's coming from a league like that. He's going to play a lot of good competition. Right. But I love the quote you have here because I didn't even realize that Mark Pope said this. But when you look at some of the best games that Brandon Garrison had at Oklahoma State, 21 against BYU last year. That was a season high for him, I believe, and so a career high, I guess you could say. He only played 1 season. So played really well against BYU last year. So Mark Pope knew that there was some interest there in this guy because he did have such a good game against them. I think he got 21 points, 7 of 8 from 2, 7 of 12 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, 2 steals. So, like, he had a game. It was only 27 minutes, by the way, too. So he did all that in 27 minutes. And I know he also mentions in the quote you have here, had a big game too. His second biggest game of the year came against Baylor, which of course was Alvin Brooks was there. So like now he's on this staff. And so the Kentucky coaches know Brandon Garrison well, just from the way he played against them last year. And I mean, look, you go that game against Baylor on January 6th. He was the Ken Palm MVP of that game. Got that 3 times last year. That was one of them. And you look at the stat line again, 20 points, 7 of 7 from 2, 6 of 6 from the free throw line, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 blocks, only 2 fouls. So you mentioned the potential, and I think it's mostly for me, it's not just that, but it's the potential in a lot of different areas. Like this is a guy who can contribute in a lot of different places because he has the size. And like you mentioned, I mean, he's a former top recruit for a reason because everybody could kind of see what this guy had. And now we see if Mark Pope can kind of tap into that even more now as he goes from freshman to sophomore.
Yeah, and so now we take everything into consideration here, what he brings to the table and how does he fit into this offense? How does he fit into this roster? Because now we kind of have that defined 1-2 punch here at the 5 with Amari Williams and Brandon Garrison. What you're going to get here, I think, is when you need that defensive rebounding, you need that rim protection. We're looking for a little bit more defense here, Amari Williams. But when you're looking at offense, a little bit of a mid-range jumper, let's get a little bit more spacing. You know, we want to play a little bit quicker. Boom, Brandon Garrison. I think it's a nice little defense for offense. And I'm not saying Amari Williams doesn't have offense. And I'm not saying Brandon Garrison doesn't hold his own on defense. I'm just saying Amari Williams, clearly, his strength is defense. Guy's multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year. And then Brandon Garrison, his strength is that smooth offense, that untapped potential that we're going to keep saying again. That you see him, he looks smooth, has that nice face-up game, can back you down. So I think that's a nice little 1-2 counterpunch there at the 5, defense for offense.
You know I love the Ken Palm player comps. This may be the best one we've ever had before.
Oh, boy.
Because it's not just one. The list of guys I'm going to give you is a player comp for 2024 Brandon Garrison. You're just going to be like, are you serious? All right, we're going to start with, actually, I'm going to try, like, what order should I go in with these? We're going to do it in, like, timeline order. So I'm going to go back to 2014. Daniel Ochefu, who, of course, played for Villanova, won a national championship at Villanova. Compared him, I think, is 2014. So that would have been his sophomore year, which, you know, he played, I want to say about 20-something minutes a game that year. So, of course, Villanova didn't win the title until a couple more years after that. But he's won there in 2014. 2016, Jimmy Taylor. Jimmy Taylor played for Alabama. So that was, I thought, interesting there. 2018, Abdul Adu. If you remember Abdul Adu at Mississippi State,
yes.
You know, he was a very high-potential guy. His freshman year played a ton for Ben Howland there. And so I found that one to be interesting because he was kind of a shot-blocking guy, but also filled the stat sheet, was pretty efficient in terms of the, you know, the opportunities he's got in the paint and those kind of things. But then here's this one. So, I mean, this is a long list, right?
Yeah.
2022 in Fali Dante.
No way.
Oregon. Yeah. So again, I mean, Dante was a pretty big factor that year. Now, was not as, you know, he was more of a factor the following 2 seasons, but he was still a pretty big factor in 2022 for that Oregon team. And so, yeah, so like you think about how many interesting sort of comps those are. You know, look, it is what it is. Like we're not saying he's going to, you know, but that's, I think it's pretty fascinating to see that those are the guys that just in one season, Brandon Garrison, you can go back and kind of comp him with all those guys. So
that's pretty cool. I wish I looked at that before.
Very interesting. So some other names on there too. Josh Henderson, former Vanderbilt guy. So like there's a ton of names on here for Brandon Garrison. So
he was meant for the SEC.
All right, now we move to Ansley Almonor. And Max, I'm just going to turn the floor over to you. You love this guy. That was the exact quote you gave me before we started recording. So I'm going to turn it over to you to explain your love for the New York man himself, Ansley Almonor.
Yeah, so we've got a New York guy here. So you already know I'm going to be a little bit biased, but let me just run you through this guy's story because it's incredible. Out of high school, not a single Division I offer. No one's offering him. Well, Almonor is saying, I'm too good. I know my talent. I'm going to do a post-grad season in the Bronx, and I'm going to get my stock up. This is a little Almonor quote on our Savior Lutheran in the Bronx. One thing about OSL that's unlike any other place I've seen or been to, everybody there works. It's a small little gym in the Bronx. If you're in that gym, you're working hard. Okay. Music to my ears right there already. I love that, okay? But it gets better, okay? So this is a quote from Almonor on why he chose Kentucky. I fit in perfectly with what they're trying to do. Coach Pope said he doesn't promise anyone playing time, so I'll go over there, work my ASS off, and I'll play. I'll do what I have to do. I'll play. Gosh, are you kidding me? So he's fired up already. And then here's another quote. This is unreal. This guy is great. Okay. He goes, "The work never stops. I want everyone at BBN to know when I put that jersey on, I'm giving it 100% and leaving it all on the floor every single day, every single practice, every single game." I'm ready to run through a brick wall for this guy.
Listen, the sound you heard was a bunch of walls breaking because everybody that just heard that is running through a brick. My dog is barking. He's so excited at this idea. Like, I mean, everybody is all in on this guy. Like, run through a brick wall for a guy like that.
I mean, exactly. We can dive into numbers. I mean, and this guy has some great numbers, some great offensive numbers. Man, is he a good shooter for his size. But we have covered a lot of transfers, Blake. We've covered a lot this offseason, and some freshmen, and some coaching changes. There's a lot of just general quotes, they're a perfect fit for what I'm trying to do and can help me get to the NBA and this and that. It's very generic when you're getting these like transfer articles and stuff. Not Ansley Almonor. He is like, this is my lifelong dream, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make this thing work. Like he's passionate about this. And hey, you got a new fan in me right here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what stands out to me when we tie it all together is, we've talked about Garrison. I mean, you talk about someone like this coming in at 6'7", 220-ish. I mean, all these guys like in the front court, 220-ish Almonor, Andrew Carr, we talked about him, 6'10", 220-ish. Amari Williams, 6'10", 265. Brandon Garrison, 6'11", 245. I mean, they got a lot of size. But then, like, you go further, right? You got Jaxson Robinson, who's 6'7". Koby Brea is 6'6". It's a big team. And I think that's something else I like just about the fit, like you said, of a guy like this who's been there. He's driven. I mean, he's played a lot of basketball now. Look, he started, 30 or 65 games over the past 2 seasons there with Fairleigh Dickinson. I think that's just something that really, when you look at it, I mean, we knew kind of what the expectation was for how they were trying to build the roster. And they've got a ton of size. They've got some older guys who have played in meaningful games. Because remember, too, he played in meaningful games last year against Purdue, or the year before against Purdue and FAU. So, yeah, like I think that is just, I mean, he was the star of the show in that game against, Texas Southern, because that would have been the play-in game, right, 2 years ago.
Yep.
And then they go on, they beat Purdue. He only had a point in that one. I think he played 25 minutes, but only had a point in that one. But still, yeah, I think it's, like, I mean, I like this roster. Like I said, we're kind of doing the roster overview now because we finally caught up. But when you think about just the 2 guys we've talked about here, what they add to the front court, you tie it all together with everything else. I'm telling you, the cats are growing on me.
Yep. And so to kind of wrap up with Almonor, so just him and Andrew Carr now are kind of slotted into that 4 spot. And I think a lot of people have put Andrew Carr as the starter, or expected Andrew Carr as a starter, and rightfully so. Coming over from the ACC is a lot different from where Almonor is coming from. But Andrew Carr he's viewed as a stretch 4. I feel like he attempted 97 threes last year. Almonor attempted 221. Okay, so like you want to talk about a guy that can shoot 40% at high volume. Over the past 2 years, Almonor is 154 for 409, just under 38%. That is a lot of threes. Okay, and then you were just talking about kind of how big this team is. Crazy you say that, because Almonor was asked what does he want to work on the most this offseason? What is he looking to really improve on? His number one thing, he says, I want to be more physical. I need to be better with contact. I don't even have anything else to say. I love this guy.
Yeah, I mean, if this entire team embraces that, and we've already talked about kind of the physicality of some of the guards. Yeah, like, I mean, you got to be physical in the SEC, we know. But if he gets more physical and he's improved it, boy, look out, because this guy may be a fun one. I think when you just look at the way this roster is constructed and how he could play into what they want to do.
Well, Blake, we might, and he played against Otega Oweh in high school, did Almonor.
Yeah.
We might be seeing Brandon Garrison, Ansley Almonor, and Otega Oweh all off the bench. All coming in as spark plugs. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, it's a deep team when you look at it on paper. I mean, I think that's what they're old and they're deep. That has been a recipe for success for teams in this era. And so you can see how and why they put the roster together the way they did. So, yeah. So it'll be fun to see how these two guys factor in the mix there in Lexington for the Cats and Mark Pope. But as always, guys, we appreciate you watching. As we mentioned earlier, check out the SEC Basketball Experience. It's the weekly long-form show we do. We've already had kind of a Kentucky-themed episode. That was episode number 2, so you can go back and watch that. We'll put it up on the screen here when the video finishes. All you got to do is click. You can go watch it now. And also check out some of the stuff we have there below. You see some products we have jumping up there. Kentucky fan-related products. All that does is help the channel. If you go buy something at one of these places, all it does gives us a little kickback. That's all it does. You're not paying anything extra, but it just helps the channel out so we can make more videos for you guys. So, again, check out the stuff there, Fanatics and everywhere else. And, again, we appreciate you watching here at Southeastern 14. Kentucky baseball fans, we got a lot of stuff coming for you, too. Check out everything on the channel. We appreciate you guys watching. We'll talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 14.